So we are learning the Torah portion, weekly Torah portion of Vayeitzei, and today is November 28th, and this is the second installment on this portion. And we're learning from Likkutei Sichot Volume 1. So let's continue where we ended yesterday. That the obstacles that make it difficult to serve Hashem are what build a strong Jewish home that is full of light and warmth. So we tried to give some explanation for that yesterday. And the explanation was in the direction that in order to come to know God, you have to immerse yourself in the physical matter, and that because that's the meaning of a home. A home is not something that's spiritual; it's something that's physical. So, like for instance, if somebody decides that he's only going to pursue God's spirituality, he's missing out on half of what God means, at least half, right? Because we said that God is both spiritual and physical, and he's neither. He's beyond both of them. So you can't really worship God as spiritual or as material, because he's beyond that. But he's at least spiritual and material, is the statement. Let's continue. The Torah tells us from 5. And the Torah tells us that Yaakov prepared himself for entering a place of danger by ensuring that the first thing he did on his way to Haran, to the house of Lavan, was to stop and to pray to Hashem. It would seem that when one is traveling to a new place to find his match, his first priority would be to learn the new language or adopt the local fashion in order to become familiar with the ways of those he will meet. We find that Yaakov put all those considerations aside and focused solely on praying to God. So that's the first thing he did. But we also know that that he had to go backwards, right? The Rebbe doesn't talk about this here. But what happened was he didn't pray, right? So that's a little hard. What do you mean? That's exactly the point. That the third prayer of the day, the nighttime prayer that Yaakov initiated, was because he seemingly passed over the place where his forefathers had prayed, which was Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, and he continued. He was very anxious to get to Haran. So, on the contrary, he was he was very much with these considerations. The Rebbe sort of glances over this. So you can say, in the Pshat, in the literal reading of the Torah, this doesn't appear, right? But you could sort of, when you read the Torah carefully, you see that there's a problem with how it states this. That he goes out to Haran, and then suddenly Vayifga b'makom, and suddenly it appears to him that he's in this place, this holy place that his forefathers had prayed in. So there has to be some cover story for this, like to connect the dots here. So to connect, the way the Rashi connects it based on the Midrash is that he remembered, he was already past Mount Moriah, and then he remembered that this was a place where his forefathers had prayed. So he went back. But because it was very late, so he had kfitzat haderech. He had a skip of the earth. This is the first time that it happened to him, right? It's not so surprising that after the earth skipped, so when he lay down to rest, to sleep, God folded, as it were, the entire earth under him. So those two things go together also, right? Because otherwise, what does it mean? The earth, the ground that you are sleeping in, I will give to you. So the literal meaning is not so interesting. The ground that you're sleeping on. Okay, so he's going to give me 2 by 2 meters, right? 5 by 5 feet or 6 by 6 feet. It's not very much of an inheritance. But the meaning really is, says the Medrash, that he folded, as it were, the entire land of Israel underneath him. So that goes in direct continuation to the fact that the earth skipped for him. And by the way, those are two different things, right? We haven't talked about this, but I have a class about this somewhere else. That there's a difference between when the earth skips for you and when you walk faster. There's two different things, right? What we have today is that we walk faster. We have planes. And so we walk much, much faster than any human or any horse can. But the earth doesn't skip for us. It's not like... Earth skipping would be like what we say, a fold in space. That you would take, like, the space is like a sheet, right? and you would say, this is space, and now I want to travel from here to here, and then suddenly these two places, they come together, they're folded. So that would be the earth skipping. That's what. So the fact that the earth was folded underneath him is not very surprising. It didn't recuperate from the skip that it had, from the folding that it had to do. So really, you should call it earth folding.
The people who lived in between squashed.
No, it's just space is not space is much more complex than that. So in the same way that nobody gets squashed if I take this piece and I bring them together. Everything else doesn't even know. It's so big. Everything else doesn't know what's going on. And there's many dimensions to it. So there's a variety of ways to explain how you could do this, and nobody at all would feel that something was amiss. It would all seem the same. In any case, we'll have to talk more about this. What was going on here? The Torah tells us that Yaakov. So we said all he did was he went to pray. What does that mean? As we mentioned previously, every detail of the Torah can teach us a valuable lesson how a Jew is meant to conduct his life. When a Jew is beginning to build a home, he may think that although up until that point he had occupied himself with Torah study, prayer, and commandments, he should now put that aside and spend his time learning how to succeed in this world. This is why the Torah informs us that Yaakov's first priority was davening to Hashem. Was to pray, first of all. A Jew must realize that when he emerges into the physical world, he must strengthen his prayer so that he fortifies himself to overcome the challenges he is about to face. Since the obstacles will be far greater than anything he has previously experienced, he must make sure to ask God for additional strength in order to withstand the challenges he will soon encounter. That's one of the purposes of prayer, right? There's prayer which is supplication, and that's this type of prayer. And there's prayer also which is thanksgiving about the past and thanking God for what it is. And there's also prayer of praise, that we just praise Hashem. But obviously Yaakov here was asking about the future, that he would have the strength, the wherewithal to withstand everything he needed to when he would arrive in Haran. So does that mean that the evening prayer should be focused on the future? Is that what it means? So usually no. Usually we say that it's the morning prayer where the person is supplicating about the future, and especially the afternoon prayer. The evening prayer is more connected to what we say to faith. It's not about the future. The thing that you need to do during the evening is to remove all the different issues that you were involved with during the day. It's like closing the day. And so when you remove all of that noise and all that static, what you're left with is faith. Faith in Hashem. What does this mean? It's the same idea with nightfall. That when it's night and you can't see all the details, it's easier. It's almost like when you're covering your eyes, when you're saying Shema, it's easier to envision that this is all God, that there's nothing else here. The Torah continues by telling us that after Yaakov davened, after he prayed, so this is the famous part that everybody remembers from this discourse. He took stones and surrounded his head, meaning he lay down to rest, and he surrounded his head with stones, big stones, so that animals wouldn't be able to attack him. That's what it seems. What kind of animals? So I always, at the times that I had to sleep in the desert, which weren't very many, but in the army it happens once in a while. I remember the thing that I was most scared of wasn't animals. Scorpions. So scorpions are easy to deal with, theoretically. If you put stones around your head, around your body, they can't get through. It's very hard for them to get through. They don't dig very well. So you feel safe that way. But still the question is, why did he do it only around his head? Rashi explains that Yaakov was afraid of the wild animals and was creating a barrier that would protect him from them. On a deeper level, this is referring to Yaakov's realization that he would need to protect himself from that which lay ahead. Right? Pun intended, lay ahead. Like he is lying down, so what's laying ahead? Yaakov was well aware of the spiritual dangers he was about to experience, and that they were already present as he journeyed to Haran before his arrival. Therefore, he guarded himself with stones to ensure that he wouldn't be spiritually harmed along the way. So before we continue and we hear the famous thing the Rebbe has to say about this, I just mentioned that we were in Italy last week. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And my conception of Italy very much changed because I'd never been there. So I had a conception that was built out of a lot of books and a lot of reading about it. But to actually see what they construct, the way they work with material, really changed a lot of my perspective on what they've accomplished. And they're geniuses and very, very invested in the material. And you see that in every single windowsill even. Everything, you see that somebody worked with hand tools. I mean, these things are like 500, 600, 700 years old. Somebody must have worked for 5-6 years on each windowsill. Because it's so full of ornaments. And it's in the stone itself. It's not like it was added later. We do things in plaster, it's like easy. But they had to actually chisel it out. And I thought, why would somebody spend 5-6 years making one windowsill? And there's like 100 windows in this building. So, what is this? What's going on? What kind of frame of mind do you have to be in? Well, they have nothing else to do. So, obviously they were paid for it and they did it as a living. But still, you have to be in a certain frame of mind to be able to do this. Because this is not like, it's not rote work. It's not something you can do by routine. It's something you really have to concentrate on. And for a long, long time, for many years. So I thought about it that they're building their name. That a person who's doing things in stone or in materials like that is building themselves a name. Every person wants to have something left after them when they pass away from this world. They want to have some name to themselves. So they don't sign their name on it, obviously, but because they're only working on a windowsill, not working on the whole edifice. But still, it's a monument that you leave after yourself. And I thought about, as Jews, we haven't had monuments in a long, long, long time. In fact, it says that monuments were beloved in the time of the patriarchs, and then they became hated.
That was altars.
Monuments. Matzeva. It's not an altar. It's like a stone that you set, and you anoint it with oil, and it becomes like a holy, sacred place. And in the time of patriarchs, God accepted that as a form of worship. But since the Torah, He doesn't. Why? So the Book of Formation says that one stone builds one house, and 2 stones build 2 houses, and 3 stones build 6 houses. So what's he talking about 3 stones? So the explanation usually is that he's talking about letters. If you have 1 letter, you can make 1 word. It's just a one letter word. If you have 2 letters, you can make 2 words. Aleph Bet and Bet Aleph, which in Hebrew really are 2 words. Av and Bo. Right? If you have 3 letters, you can make 6 words because you can permute them in 6 different ways. If you have 4, then you can make 24. If you have 5, it's 120. 6, it's 720, and so on. These are factorial, as we call it. N factorial numbers. The number of permutations you can make out of those. Jews build out of letters. That's the takeaway. That we also, people work on a book like you worked on your stories. When you work on your stories, you're leaving yourself a name. Right? When you write, you're taking stones and you're putting them together. And the very important books in Judaism, the really important books in Torah, they took 20 and 30 years to write. For instance, the Tanya, it took him 20 years to write it. And it says that he weighed every single letter. What's that like? That's like a stonemason working on a tremendous building. And he's doing it all single-handedly. And in 20 years, he builds a building which is incredible. The monument, the physical monument, is no longer beloved. It's like we're saying the only monument we really want is the temple in Jerusalem. We don't want any other monuments. We don't want anything else made out of matter. But really, the people who wrote these books, like the Torah itself by Moses, and then the prophets, and then the writings, and then the Mishnah, and then the Talmud, These books are much more ancient than any building in the world today, any building that's actually used. And think about how many people go into this building every single day. Every one of these books is used profusely by hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people every single day. There's no building like that in the world. So it's a different form of building. You're building out of letters, and you're making it into a building that's made out of letters. That's really how you also protect yourself. Because psychology, we've said this many times, is learning the right words to have inside yourself. Psychology is really building up your psyche by having the right sentences inside, by having the right way. It's like when you have a house, you use it for shelter. If you have the right sentences inside, if you've built yourself up properly, reading the right things, learning the right things, and integrating them very strongly into yourself, then when there's a storm in life, and there's always storms in life, then you have shelter inside. You have a building that you can go into. That's what Yaakov was doing. He was taking these stones and putting them around his head. It's like building his psychological makeup and making sure that he can withstand any storm that might come to him. So we have to end. It's 8 o'clock. And we'll continue tomorrow, and we'll see what the Rebbe says about why Yaakov only encircled his head and didn't encircle his body. But what we just explained is a different explanation. It just means that he was encircling his psyche. He was building himself up to be able to withstand any type of storm through the use of stones, which is really letters. But in the time of the forefathers, before there was Torah, so they did it with something physical, as it were.